Okay, it's 2:30 p.m. So
Okay, yes,
yeah.
start. Thank you everybody for joining us and welcome. My name is Lucia. Lynn and Zend, do you want to introduce yourselves?
I can introduce myself. I'm Lynn. I'm the Digital Communications Manager for the Lemur Conservation Network. And we're very excited to have you here today in our first webinar on conservation technology with Matthew. So thank you all for coming.
My name is Seheno Andriantsaralaza. I'm the Madagascar manager of the Lemur Conservation Network. We are so happy and excited to have you guys with this training, and we are grateful for Matthew to give us this training today. Thank you.
And I'm Lucia Rodriguez. I am a Lemur Conservation Network Director, and we're very excited to be here and to have the opportunity to have this space with you. And we're eternally grateful for Matthew, because Matthew even reached out to us for offering this this webinar and this training, and we're really happy and excited to see the possibility of having more of these trainings and to be able to learn and to and between each other and have someone as experienced as Matthew. So this is Matthew Moskwik. He has over 20 years of experience working in conservation biology. He graduated with a bachelor's and master's degree from Eastern Washington University and completed his PhD at the University of Texas. In addition, he holds a bachelor's degree in education and a certificate excuse me, in applied statistical modeling. His experience includes leading field studies in the United States, Costa Rica, and Sierra Leone, as well as using statistical models to understand and quantify the impact of landscape and climate change of threatened and endangered species. Finally, he's fascinated by Madagascar's unique flora and fauna and traveled the country in 2018. And I believe that is the reason why we're all here today, because of his passion of Madagascar that goes really identify with us in the work we do in the Lemur Conservation Network. So here we're here today. I won't be taking much of his time. I'm just really grateful for all of you to come in here and be posted to our further activities, because we are going to try to do more webinars and trainings and more dynamic activities where we love for you to participate in. And just to say that the Lemur Conservation Network is just a space for you as well. So please reach out if you have questions, comments, or if you want to do further collaborations. That's why we're here for. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Lucia. That was a very gracious introduction. I really appreciate it. And I'm really excited by all of you that are here. Y'all are the researchers in Madagascar doing the research that I read about. And I'm really excited to be able to meet you. And I hope that this seminar that I'm going to provide today is helpful to you. And I would love for you to reach out to me directly or to Lucia or anyone else in the Conservation Network to let them know, how useful you thought this was today, and provide any additional information or just what you learned or what you would like to see, and that gives us some feedback so that way we can tailor potentially some additional seminars in the future to better meet your needs. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give a PowerPoint presentation, a brief overview of GIS, and then we're going to look at a demonstration of building a project in GIS, specifically in a program called QGIS. And I just also want to preface this by saying this is a very brief introduction. So it's going to give you a little bit of flavor about how you can build a map in GIS. GIS is a very powerful program. It allows you to manipulate data, do calculations, and at the end of the seminar today, we're not going to get to that level. I'm just simply going to introduce you to the concept of GIS and how to build some simple maps. If you are interested in really learning more, the starter sheet that I provided, and I think, I don't know if Lucia sent it out yet or she will be sending it out, but there is a starter sheet that provides you with additional links for training that you can use to learn more about this program and how you can use it. Additionally, I'm always available for contact. If you all would like to contact me, I can help you. Or if there's an overwhelming interest in learning more about this program from everyone in the group, maybe we can schedule another seminar where we go in more in depth about a specific topic. So just kind of wanted to provide that as a primer. Now what I'm going to go ahead and do is share my screen.
Sorry, yeah.
Okay.
Matthew, I will just translate what I
go ahead.
for the key point. Yeah. Mamerina ny fiarabanantsika rehetra. Nazava kely ny fomba anaovantsika an'ilay fiofanana androany. Andika kely ny zavatra notenen'ny Lucia sy Mathieu teo aloha. Lucia Rodriguez no directeur ny Lemur Conservation Network. Ny Lemur Conservation Network no mikarakara an'izao fiofanana izao miaraka amin'ny Mathieu Moskwik ary faly dia faly izahay mandray anareo rehetra. Tadidio fa tena espace tiana atao espace ho anareo mihitsy izao karazana training izao ary voalohany karazana projet pilote zany izao zavatra ataonay izao mba ahitana hoe ahoana no ahafahantsika mifanampy mifampitsinjo mahafanome traikefa tahaka ny fahaizana ny resaka système d'information géographique na ny SIG ohatra. I Mathieu Moskwik zany no hanome fiofanana ho antsika, faly dia faly izy mandray antsika ary hoy izy hoe mijery ny fikarohana Madagasikara foana izy tia be Madagasikara izy ary ianareo ireo no mpikaroka jereva ny asa ataontsika mahafinaritra be zany. Mandritra an'izao fiofanana izao dia nampatsiahy izy fa tsy hoe androany dia androantsika dia hivoaka ho expert en QGIS tsy izay ilay izy fa introduction brève fotsiny ozy izy na zavatra hoe tena le contexte général ahafahana hoe ahoana no ahafahantsika manao karta ohatra na mametraka amin'ny données antsika anatin'ny QGIS izay ny tanjona androany. Nafatra ihany koa izy fa raha misy aorianan'izao fiofanana izao tiantsika andalina kokoa isika dia andefa lien i Lucia, andefa lien izy mba ahafahantsika manana ressources na matériel ahafahantsika mandeha lavitra kokoa ho an'ilay QGIS. Ary vonona ihany koa Mathieu hanampy antsika raha misy mitina kely tiana ataontsika miaraka aminy na raha ohatra manana fanontaniana ianareo dia aza misalasala fa afaka atao daholo izany rehetra izany. Ny fandehan'ny fiofanana dia toy izao. Mandritra ny fiofanana ataon'ny Mathieu dia misy traduction kely foana ataoko ao aorianan'ny zavatra teneniny fa na izany ary dia tsy tena hoe ho traduiseko daholo akory ny zavatra ho tenenin'ny Mathieu fa tsika mahazo teny anglisy daholo ihany mino fa ilay hoe tena ina zany ny point clé dia izay no hazavaina. Mangataka antsika anatin'ilay Zoom rehefa tsy miteny isika dia atao mute ilay feo kely eto ambany eto ary afaka mametraka fanontaniana amin'ny chat isika iangaviana fotsiny mba raha ohatra misy fanontaniana spesifika zany ao anatin'izany manao traduction iny no afaka mametraka an'izay ao aorianan'izay fa atao zavatra tena spesifika ilay izy question roa na telo no apetraka isaky ny break. Ary amin'ny farantsika raha misy fotoana dia mbola afaka mametraka fanontaniana ihany. Ao aorianan'izao session voalohany izao dia i session faharoa izay ahafahana tena manao fifanankalozakevitra Q&A session ilay izy discussion no ataontsika ao anatin'izany. I mahafaly anay ihany koa no mampifantatra anareo fa i Misa Rasolozaka izay anisan'ny LCN volunteer na volontaire anatin'ny LCN dia anampy ahy amin'ny fanazavana izay omen'ny Mathieu ary anampy anay ihany koa izy amin'ny fanontaniana rehetra izay ananantsika ihany koa dia soranazy manokana izany. Manasa antsika raha metraka amin'ny fanontaniana ao amin'ny chat raha misy izany dia alefantsika avy hatrany ny fampiofanana. Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you, Matthew. You can go ahead.
Then can you please make Matthew co-host?
I seem to be able to do it now, potentially.
Yes, yeah.
There we go. All right, so I assume everyone can see my screen, see the first slide in the PowerPoint here. Are we good on that? Okay, great. All right, so let me go ahead and, so I already outlined this earlier. I'm going to provide this very brief introductory presentation, followed by a good portion of the time we'll be doing a demonstration in QGIS, showing you how to build a map. And then next week at the same time, so on Wednesday at the same time, we'll have a question and answer session. This will give you the ability, after what you've seen here today, to go install the program and start learning it, and then bring any questions or any problems that you had back next week, and we can talk about those. So what is GIS? GIS is an acronym which stands for Geographic Information System. It's basically a system that's designed to capture, store, manipulate, analyze, manage, and present geographically referenced data. So it's nothing more than simply just a way to manage information or data. The only difference between this and data in a database is that it has a geographic coordinate that allows us to plot it on the globe. There are several different types of GIS data, the first being vector data. And vector data can have three different forms. It can come in the form of points, lines, or polygons. Points are essentially a spatial object with no area. And that's what you can see here on the map on the right-hand side of the screen, is essentially I have a number of small points. Each of these points actually represent the location of where Jordan's salamander has been found on the landscape. Lines are a connected series of points. And I don't have any lines drawn, but you can think of the lines as this road up here. And there's another road here. It's a little bit hard to see, but these roads are essentially lines. Polygons are defined as a closed area. You can think of these as squares, rectangles, any type of essential polygon is anything that has a closed area. And what we have here is an example of a closed area. This is the boundary of Great Smoky Mountain National Park. And so this is essentially a polygon that represents areas inside the park versus areas outside the park. A second major data type is known as raster data. Raster data is basically a grid cell structure where the geographic area is divided into cells by columns and by rows. So essentially you have a grid across the landscape. And that's what gives it this jagged edging appearance, is because you have a bunch of small little grid cells in here. Each of those grid cells contains some data or information that's important. And what we actually see on this map is the probability of occurrence, meaning how likely it is that you would find a Jordan salamander if you were located at each of these grid cells in the park. Red meaning you have a much higher chance of finding the species, green meaning you have a very low chance of finding the species. So those are essentially the two different major data types that we work with in GIS, either the vector data or the raster data. Now, all data in GIS has a projection, and the projection tells the computer or the program where to plot it on the Earth's surface. The other reason that we have projections is because if you think about where data is located on the globe or the planet Earth is a three-dimensional space, right? It's round. But we're plotting it on a two-dimensional screen, essentially a flat map. So the projections basically help convert locations from this three-dimensional Earth surface to the two-dimensional map representation. And the reason I'm bringing up projections is because, like I said, all of your data has a projection, but it may not necessarily have the same projection. There are dozens and dozens of different projections. Usually a country has its own projection, as well as there are international projections. Sometimes there are province projections. And so when you're working with a lot of data, it's important to know what projection your data is in, especially if you start to manipulate it. If you start to run calculations on it, then it's important to put it all into the same projection. Now, QGIS has a functionality known as projection on the fly, which means that it can correctly display data in different projections. And we're going to actually do some of that today. We're going to add data to our project that's in different projections, and it's going to display accurately. But again, if you start doing calculations, it would probably be wise to reproject that into the same projection. We're not going to have a chance to talk a lot about that today, but there are a lot of good materials that explain that in some of the training websites that I sent you, or we could spend more time talking about it if there was interest at a later seminar. I'm going to give you some very brief examples of what I've been able to do in GIS over the years. We saw this map earlier. This is the probability of encountering a Jordan salamander inside of a national park boundary. Again, reds meaning a higher likelihood, green, low likelihood. What this is the current time period. When I say current, I mean if I were to go out there today, this is what I would find. But I actually did some projections, what's called a projection or a prediction into the future, to see by the middle of this century what might happen because of climate change. This area is actually seeing a lot of warming, and this species needs cool temperatures in order to survive. And what you can see is the probability of encountering the species declines. You don't have these red colors anymore. So it's much less likely in the future that this species will persist within this national park. Another very quick example that you can do with GIS is what I did here is I actually built a connectivity model. I was interested to see how species were moving across the landscape. And so what you can see in essentially red, orange, and green are habitat patches that have been designated as red being the most critical, orange being less critical, green being in much better case. So we classified the different habitat patches based on how important they were to species. And then we ran a connectivity model, which basically looks at how species might be moving across the landscape. And that's what this yellow is. And so what this allows us then to do is to say, well, geez, maybe we need to protect some land in these areas here where the species may be moving between habitat patches. All right, I'm going to stop there. Seheno, do you want to summarize at this point before I go and do the demonstration?
Yes, please. Yeah, can you go to your introduction slides and go at the first, please? The first slide.
Oh, sure. Sorry about that. I'll just reopen it up.
I will just translate the key points with Misa. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Eny ary anao traduction kelin'ny zavatra tenenin'ny mafio teo izao sy Misa ifampitsinjara amin'izany. Ny zavatra nasehoany teo zany dia ny introduction an'ilay ataontsika hoe système d'information géographique. Miala tsiny aloha fa ny terme zany na teny anglisy na teny frantsay tsy dia mbola mahita terme teny gasy loatra aloha isika hatreto. système anankiray io information géographique io mba ahafahantsika mampiditra données, manipuler données rehetrarehetra ary indrindra manipuler an'ilay données ataontsika hoe géographiquement référencé, zany hoe rehefa misy an'ilay données misy données avy any amin'ny terrain ataontsika misy coordonnées GPS de anao analyse an'ireny tsika ikirakira an'ireny tsika de ny système d'information géographique no karazana fitaovana ahafahantsika manao an'izay. The second slide, please. Yeah, thank you. Ny zavatra resahan'ny Mafy teo ny données vecteur dia misy karazany ireo efa atorony ireo ny point, ny ligne, ny polygone, reo angambany tonga de ny sary avy hatrany no miteny an'izay fa rehefa tafiditra anatin'ny système d'information géographique zany données atsika de mandray vecteur izy de na izy sous forme-na point raha ohatra hoe données absence présence ohatra, na izy sous forme-na ligne, rivière ohatra, na izy surface anankiray niesantsika de mandray données polygone izy. Yeah, the next slide, please. Yeah, saiko Misa hanazava kely an'ilay raster data.
Okay. Tonga dia ialana tsiny dia mialoha raha betsaka ny vary amin'anana fa araka lazain'ny Seheno teo hoe mbola vitsy kely, mbola tsy misy mihitsy no angambany hoe dika teny gasy amin'ireto terme reto ny raster, ny données raster raha azavaina amin'ny ambanimbany dia fitambarana matrisina cellule maromaro, fitambarana matrisina cellule maromaro dia ilay cellule anankiray pixel ny anarany. Io pixel io manino moa manome information anankiray, isaky ny pixel zany dia information anankiray zay mety midika manambara toerana na objet anankiray eo ambony tany na paysage. Reo zao misy pixel maromaro amin'ilay sary teo natorony maitsomaitso midika tsy hainiko tsara izy teo zany fa miala tsiny ilay maitsomaitso misy dikany mavomavo ny volomboasary. Misy information foana zany miainga isaky ny pixel tsirairay avy. Ny karazana raster data zay hitantsika dia ny image satellite na ireny image azo avy amin'ny roplanina ireny, Google Earth ireny zao dia efa karazana raster data. Zay angambany raha azavaina amin'ny ambanivandina.
Yeah, thank you, Miss. Next slide, please. Ty resaka projection ty aloha raha ohatra hoe ao antsika efa manandrana manisy données anatin'ny QGIS na ArcGIS dia tena anisan'ny zavatra sarotra be izy io raha ho anahy manokana aloha fa raha ny fanazavana zany dia ny données spatiales rehetrarehetra dia mila projection daholo satria ilay tany boribory dia mila jerevantsika tsara zany ny dimension ametrahantsika dimension 3 satria 3 dimension amin'ilay tany dia rehefa atao amin'ny surface plane izy io dia mila misy conversion zany mila atao foana dia izay zavatra izay rehefa miditra lalindalina anatin'ilay fampiasana sy fikirakirana ilay QGIS tsika no mahita anazy fa anisan'ny zavatra tena important izy io. Tsy haiko raha misy anampiana kely momba an'ilay projection misy.
Efa voalaza ilay izy zany hoe ny tany boribory 3D ny paoziny sarotra be amintsika ny hanao analyse, hanao étude raha ohatra ka amin'iny. Tsika mila zavatra plane, surface plane dia transformation mathématique ilay izy avy amina surface 3D makana amin'ny surface 2D. Isaky ny firenena misy karazana système de coordonnées de référence be da be ny firenena tsirairay avy arakaraka ny analyse tiana atao sy ny zavatra tiana avoaka. Fa zay angamba raha étude hafa sy anona hafa indray raha tia halala bebe kokoa momba an'izay.
Next slide, please. Sorry. Yes. Thank you. Ity indray ny tena tanjony ny zavatra asehony mafio dia hoe inona ny karazana zavatra mety mipoitra zany na hoe inona ny résultat zany azontsika ananana rehefa hoe mahay mikirakira tsara le QGIS tsika. Zay zany ty introduction ty mbola tsy miditra hoe ahoana le fanaovana an'ilay izy fa rehefa mahay an'ilay izy tsika dia io ny zavatra mitranga, io ny karta ohatran'io zany ny karazana karta azontsika. Zay ny tena tanjona amin'ity resaka amin'ity hoe introduction exemple fotsiny zany io alohan'ny tena hidirantsika anatin'le hoe ahoana no lalana na inabo ny zavatra atao atongavana amin'io. Yeah. Next slide, I think will be the last. Yes. Dia zay zavatra nyteneniko zay teo zay ihany karazana karta nataony mafio anatin'ilay QGIS io na zavakely teo izy tena araroko tsara aloha le zavatra le fanazavana fa description ny zavatra ataony afaka manampy misy.
Ie, le izy ngamba le izy raha en résumé manana données be da be zany ianao avy any amin'ny terrain na karazana données anananao be da be mihitsy ny zavatra afaka ampiasainao ireo données ireo raha ampidirinao anatin'ny QGIS na logiciel SIG afaka manao analyse ohatrany hoe aiza ohatran'ny resaka BIP sa inona ny resahany teto raha tsy diso afaka anaovana analyse be da be zany miainga avy amin'ny données brutes atsika fa ny anaty ala raha ampidirina anatin'ny SIG.
Ya, alohan'ny hanomezantsika any Mathieu dia somary miteny kely aho hoe aleontsika manao an'ilay question amin'ny chat dia zay question rehetra anantsika dia afaka apetraka ao amin'ny chat. Raha tena spesifika ilay izy dia ataontsika anatin'le mandritra le manao traduction no avalony ny fantaniana raha somary général ilay izy dia na amin'ny session manaraka na amin'ny farany. I've just explained for everybody. We cannot take the one question by questions, but if you have any questions, please put in the chat and we will respond the question if it's very specific to what Matthew explained earlier, and if it's more general questions, we will take it in for the next session or at the end of this first session. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and close this, and we're going to now start talking about QGIS. So in the starter sheet that I provided, it provides you with a link and a few directions about how to install QGIS on your computer. When you open QGIS for the first time, you'll see a screen that looks like this. And what you'll want to do is actually to start a new project, a new empty project. And so in order to do that, all we have to do is double click on the new empty project. And what you can see now is I have a nice blank space here in the center of my screen. This is going to be where I'm going to create my map, is right here. I also want to bring your attention to 3 different panels on the screen. This panel here is known as the browser panel. It allows me to navigate on my computer to locations that have data that I want to add to this project. We'll do that here in a minute. There's also a layers panel. This panel shows me all of the different layers or vector and raster data that I have added to this project that I can then turn on or off to display on my map. Finally, there's this processing toolbox layer over here on the right, which contains a variety of tools that allow me to do calculations on my layers and data that I have on the screen. We may get a chance to run one of these today as an example. Now, I also have up on the top of my screen here a number of what are called buttons. And each of these buttons are different types of tools that I can use, again, to manipulate my data or change the way that it looks here. And so if I hover over it, it will give me a little description about what that tool does. If you're missing a layer panel or you're missing a toolbar with tools, you can always come into this menu and click on View. And if you come down here, there's actually a panels menu, and you can come in here and make a decision. Well, I actually want to use the advanced digitizing panel. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And so now I have an advanced digitizing panel. Now it's actually been grayed out because I don't have any data that applies to it at this time. But this will give you the ability essentially to turn on and off panels. I'm going to go ahead and turn off that panel. So if you accidentally click there and it disappears, all you have to do is go to View, go to Panels, and click on Browser, and now it will be back. The same thing is the case for these various toolbars. If I go to View, I go down to Toolbars, and you can see which toolbars have been activated by having a check and which ones are not active, and you could click on them and they would then show up for your use. Seheno, I think we have a break here.
Yes, thank you. Fanazavana tsotsotra an'ilay présentation an'ilay logiciel QGIS fanombohana no nataony Mafio teo. Nanokatra projet vaovao izy dia hitanareo amin'ireo ambony ireo ny karazana barbotiny marobe. Nanazava izy ihany koa ilay fanehoana na fanalana an'ilay karazana panel. Mariako fa tsy nitanjona tsy hoe amerina izay tsika androany fa mahita fotsiny hoe ahoana zavatra ataony logikan'ilay izy no ezahantsika miaraka eto ho azo. Ny logikan'ilay izy dia misy an'ireo karazana barbotiny ireo afaka ampiasaina daholo ambony amin'ny ankavia reto sy ilay teo ambany teo. Dia layers na ilay couche io no asehony ampiasa be an'io tsika. Le panel na panneau angamba mety azahoana azy, afaka manoratra amin'ny chat koa tsika raha mahita hoe misy zavatra tsy mety kely fanazavako amin'le terme. Fa le fanehoana na fanalana an'ilay panel no nasehoany teo. Karazana introduction kely view azy hoe inona izao zavatra hitantsika amin'ny écran Mafio izao. Ya, raha misy fanontaniana dia afaka apetraka amin'ny chat ihany. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Seheno. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to start to add some vector data to our display here. And so in order to do that, remember I can use my browser panel to navigate to where I might have that on my computer. So I actually put my data on the C drive under users, my username, but it could vary, depends on where you've decided to drop the data on your computer. Okay. So the first layer that I want to add is actually going to be a polygon layer. And it's a polygon layer that's going to show me where the protected areas in Madagascar are. And all I have to do to add this layer is to click it, drag it over to this area, my map area, and release or drop it. And now the data will automatically be added to my screen here in a second. One thing while this data is adding that I would like to talk about is that most of GIS data comes in the format of a shapefile, and you can actually see that here. It says protected areas.shp. Shapefiles are widely used in GIS programs, and as a bit of information, shapefiles typically, if we look at a shapefile here, are made up of many other files. So you can see that there are 7 files in this folder. This is a database file, a DBF. This is a projection file. There's some drawing files, but all of these together make up one shapefile. The reason that I'm telling you this is because if you want to start saving or sharing some of your data with your colleagues or with others, and it's stored in shapefiles, you will need to send them all of these files. If they don't have if you don't send all these files, that their data will not display correctly in QGIS. So just be aware that if your data is in shape files, which is a very common file type, a shape file is actually made up of a number of different files, in this case, 7 different files. So we went ahead and added a shape file of protected areas that I downloaded off the internet, and I put in the starter sheet where I grabbed this information. Okay. Now, what you can do after you've added this layer to your map, as you can see now it's become active over here in the layer panel. We can actually right click on it and go down to properties, click on properties, and it's going to pull up a window. And I apologize, things seem to be running a bit slower than normal today. Here we go. And if we go up to the information tab, we can see some information that's provided about this layer that I added here. So it's called protected areas. It provides me with the location of where the data is on my computer. It says it's an Esri shapefile, which is what I just talked about. It's a polygon feature. So this is the type of vector data. And it also tells me the projection that it's in. It's in a specific projection called WGS 84. This is actually a universal projection system, meaning it works for anywhere on the globe. And then it gives me the units. What are the units that this data is in? And then a feature count, or how many polygons are there. So there's approximately 163 protected polygons. So just a little bit of information about that data. There is also what's called an attribute table that's associated with these polygons. And the attribute table provides us with specific information about each polygon. In order to access that, if I right click on this layer again, and I go down to open attribute table, it's now pulled up a data table that has a number of fields or columns that provide us with some information about each of these polygons. And if I actually come down here, and I'm just going to click on number 7 here. Oh, I don't see anything. It's because these are very small protected areas. There we go. So if I click on number 9, you can see down here, hopefully you can see this little protected area turned yellow, meaning that essentially this record here is associated with this polygon. So now we can view some information about that polygon. We can view the name, the original name, how is it designated? It's designated as a national park. Designation type, IUCN category, and there's a variety of other data that are associated with each of these. So you can navigate through this attribute table and click on these and then view this information and know which polygon, in this case up here, that's associated with. There's another simpler way to do this. I'm going to close this attribute table, and I actually have another tool that I can't see because, there we go, because this tool I just clicked on is called the Identify. Actually, let me shrink that so it's a little bit easier for you guys to see. This is called the Identify tool here. And I click on this button. And what this allows me to do is simply just to left click on a polygon, and it pulls up the information about that polygon on the side here. It opens another panel, and it provides me with the same information from the attribute table that I just looked at. So this is a much more convenient way to get data about each of these polygons. Simply click the Identify tool, and it pulls up the information here on the left, or excuse me, on the right-hand side of the screen. Okay. Now, the next thing that I would like to do is I'm going to import some lines. So we imported some polygons here, and we looked at the information about each of the we found how we could find information about each of the polygons, as well as viewed some information overall about the data. And now I want to add a line feature. So I actually have another shapefile here in my browser panel called Madagascar roads. So these are the major roads in Madagascar. And I'm going to click, drag, and drop that on my surface. Okay, so now you can see the major roads that are found in Madagascar. I'm going to go ahead and click this deselect features button, which is going to get rid of that yellow color up there, that one I had selected earlier. And I'm actually going to click over here off screen to get rid of my identifying polygon here. And so now we can look at this, and we might actually want to change some of these colors. So QGIS automatically comes up with colors that it thinks you might want for your data. But maybe we actually don't want these colors. And so if we want to change the way it looks, we can right-click again on the layer, protected areas, go down to properties, go to symbology. So symbology is where you can change the way that they look. And I actually want to get rid of the lines. I don't want the lines on the outside because it actually makes it hard to tell which are the boundaries and which are the roads. So I'm going to click on this simple fill up here at the top. And then here it says that there's a solid line being used as the outline. I don't want a line, so I'm going to click no pen. It gets rid of the line. And I think I'm actually going to change the color of this a little bit. I want to make it more of a brown color. I like that better. So I'm going to choose more of a brown color. And I did that by going into fill color. Now, in order to make these changes on the map, I have to click this apply button. And when I click the apply button, you can see now that the map has been updated with my changes. I didn't click OK. The reason I didn't do that is because if I don't like how it looks, it doesn't close this menu. If I were to click OK, it would change the way this looks, but this menu would disappear and I'd have to reopen it. So I just simply click apply, see if I like it. I do like it. And now I'm going to click OK. Now, the next thing I want to do is I actually want to change the way that these roads look. So it's very similar to what we just did. Right click here, go down to properties. It's already pulling up the symbology, and right now it's saying that the roads are colored green. I actually want to make them maybe a black, so that way they're a little bit easier to see. And if I click apply, now you can see the roads have changed to black. They are a little bit striking, a little bit harsh to the eye. So what I actually want to do is I want to fade them out. I want to make them less vivid. So in order to do that, I'm actually going to take the opacity, which essentially makes them more see-through or transparent. I'm going to drop that down to 60%. If I click apply, now you can see they've gotten a bit lighter, meaning that they're a little bit easier to look through. I'm going to drop it down just a tad bit more, click apply, and I think we're good to go. There. One last thing that I want to show you is the ability to change the drawing order. And we'll do some of this later today. Right now, you can see the roads are drawn on top of the polygons, but maybe I didn't want that. Maybe I wanted the polygons to draw on top of the roads. If I wanted to do that, all I have to do is click the layer that I want to move, drag it below the other layer, and release. And when I do that, what's happening now is the polygons are drawing on top of the roads, right? We can't see the roads anymore. They're hidden underneath these polygons. But I actually don't want to do that. I want to show the roads on top of the polygons. So I'm going to click, drag, and drop this back on top. And now you can see the roads are back on the polygons. All right, Seheno, I think you're going to summarize from here.
Yes, thank you. Ametraka an'le fanazavana iteny kely aho hoe afaka ametraka fantaniana tsika mbola tsisy fantaniana hitaka ihany azontsika daholo angambany izany ve le izy sa hoe tsisy azo indray amin'izay ihany manko. Inona ny zavatra nataony mafio teo ametraka kely fantaniana aloha dia avy eo nazava dia le valin'ny fantaniana afaka atao amin'ny chat. Inona ny karazana données nampidiriny mafio? Inona ny karazana données nampidiriny teo nametraka point ve izy sa nametraka ligne ve izy sa nametraka polygone ve izy sa inona ny zavatra nataony sa hoe nanaonao sary fotsiny ve izy apetraka ao anatin'ny chat ny valin'ny fantaniana. Mizara anankitelo ny fanazavana omeko dia ny aorianan'izay dia anohy i Misa. Voalohany azadino fa ao anatin'ilay atao hoe browser tiana le navigation anatin'le ordinateur anareo zany io le données anatin'le ordinateur anareo io dia rehefa te hampiditra an'io nareo dia reo avy ireo données reo tonga dia avy hatrany manao drag and drop ozy izy madio teo, zany hoe alaina izy to dia apetraka amin'ilay QGIS teo. Inona ilay extension ozy izy tsy maintsy shapefile. Dia ozy izy hoe ilay shapefile jereo tsara fa raha vao tsy ampy fichier anankifito ilay izy dia tsy mipetraka eo mihitsy zany izy. Raha misy problème zany ianao hoe andeha hametraka ilay shapefile dia tsy mipoitra ilay izy mba jereo ihany hoe sao dia tsy ao daholo ilay fichier anankifito ireo. Tsy afaka mametraka zany tsika données ohatra hoe point extension ohatra hoe point doc ohatra dia tsy possible zany ilay izy fa point shapefile. Iny ihany koa ny manaraka dia ozy izy hoe rehefa tonga ilay données nampidiriny teo dia efa misy mamaly ato hoe inona daholo le données teo très bien. Rehefa namaly rehefa petraka le polygone teo dia miverina lasa mahazo an'ilay couche atao hoe layer io layer io dia io layer io mipoitra eo misy information na hoe inona ny zavatra tianao ho fantatra momba an'ilay données izay nampidirinao izay mivadika couche dia napoitra ny teo ilay information tsara no mijery an'ireny verifie an'ireny. Ameko ny Misa ny fitenenana manazavana juste traduction kely fotsiny ho an'ny zareo. So I've asking, because we don't have any question, I asked a question to the Chinese and I asked what are the type of the data that Matthew entered in our the QGIS. Yeah, so they responded the answer and that's very good. Okay, Misa, go ahead, thank you.
Okay, so there was a question from Daniel who asked where could we find or download the database that Matthew used. Matthew already responded. Thank you, Matthew. A sheet will be provided that will show where he obtained the data. Okay. So, okay, I'm going to continue the explanation in Malagasy. Napitra données polygone sy ligne izy polygone le protected area dia ligne le lalana. Mahafinaritra be amin'itony données vecteur tony be da be ny information azo anatina données vecteur anankiray. Zany information zany dia hitantsika ao anatin'ny table attributaire attributable ny anarany raha tsy diso teo. Clic droite, ça moa zany tsy afaka mikitika. Clic droite amin'ilay couche nareo raha te hita mombamomba an'ilay données vecteur anankiray na ligne na point na polygone io dia tsy maintsy tokony misy information miaraka amin'ny foana. Clic droite dia misy hoe attributable na table attributaire dia afaka hitanareo ny mombamomba an'ilay ohatra hoe raha lalana io zao dia hoe hainy firy izy, aiza région sy ny sisa. Dia mahafinaritra be milalao an'ny données vectorielles koa afaka hovaintsika ny paoziny sy ny lokony moa zany, ny lokony amin'ny ankapobeny ny lokon'ny données vectorielles mba ahafahantsika mahita mba ho tsaratsara kokoa ny carte izay avoakantsika rehefa avy eo. Ity zao izy dia novainy ho volontany marron, ny protected area dia nataony maintimainty ny lalana. Ao anatin'ny properties, propriété, clic droit des propriétés, raha tsy diso ny ahitana azy dia misy hoe symbology dia afaka manova ny transparence an'izay couche tianareo, ohatra hoe tianareo atao transparent kokoa ny couche iray dia ahena atombo ny transparence dia ny loko, dia misy loko ao. Rehefa manova an'ireo nefa dia misy hoe OK, misy hoe OK, dia misy hoe apply, OK na appliquer. Raha ataonareo OK ohatra izy novainareo marron, raha ataonareo OK tonga dia miala les fenêtres misy an'le symbologie. Dia miverina miditra indray nareo ohatra tsy tianareo le marron fa ny tena fanao anazy atao appliquer fotsiny dia hitanareo tiako zao an'izao na hoe allo fa vaiko maitsomaitso indray ity ka dia appliquer. Dia rehefa tena afa-po izay vao OK. Zay angambany amin'ny ankapobeny.
Sotra betsaka, Miss. There is one question from Nancia. She asked, how can we identify the difference between national road and the main road? There are some main roads in Madagascar called the national roads, and there are some secondary roads. So how can we do the distinction on the map? So you are muted, Matthew. Yes.
That's a great question. One thing we can do to try to answer that question is to first open, oops, I don't want to do that there. Open down here on the layer, the attribute table. And I'm not sure if this is the best data to be using, but you can see similar to before, we have information about each one of these roads in the table. And we can identify some of the information from this, right, by either clicking on this and it being highlighted on the map. It's a little bit hard to see right now. Or we can go over here and use our identify tool and drag a little box and release, and it'll tell us the information about that section of the road here. That's one way to get that information. If you actually want to color it by different types of roads, you can do that. You would need to go into down here again to properties. And we can actually provide some in Symbology. Let's see. There is a way to change the symbology. I would need to spend a little bit more time in here to figure out exactly how this layer is set up, but there is a way to change the symbology to where you're telling it color the different roads different colors, if that would be, you know, of helpful to you. So I don't think I'll dive into, oh, here, this is actually what I want to do. So I want to come up here to categorize. It's been a while since I've done this. So if we come up to, right now there's a single symbol for all of the roads. We can come up to categorize, and now within categorized, we can categorize each of these different aspects of roads and change the colors depending upon what type of road they are. Again, I'm not going to dive into that right now because I want to make sure we have time for our other topics, but that's how you could get some information about the roads, as well as how you could potentially change the symbology to match the different types of roads that are there. Okay, I see where we're.
Sorry, Matthew, sorry. There's a question from the Is Gis user. Can you please turn your question to so that everyone could see it, because it's only me that see it. Sorry. So he is asking, are data made online by Rebioma still available? Maybe one way to get them.
The data for this, what was here that I'm showing today?
No, from Rebioma. What's Rebioma?
from, okay. Actually, I think probably what's best at this point, I appreciate everyone's questions, but let's see if we can go ahead and keep typing your questions in. I want to get through a few more points here so we can see a couple additional things we can do in this map.
Sure.
If there's still time at the end, I'll get to those questions. If not, we'll address a lot of those questions next time, next week, right, during this section. But please keep dropping your questions in now so you don't forget. But thank you for bringing those up. All right, so the next thing I want to do, since we're running a little short on time, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here and show you some additional kind of things you can do with your map. So right now we have these polygons in lines, and but we don't have a good sense of where we are in the greater world. There's no ocean, there's no coastline. It might be nice to have some additional information about, what these things are plotted on. And so in order to do that, you can actually come up here to the menu and click on plugins. And plugins are simply just add-ons. So they don't come when you download QGIS. You have to install these separately, and they give you some additional functions that you can do. So you'll come down to plugins, click on manage and install. It's actually going to pull up a list of possible plugins that I might be interested in. And the plugin that we're interested in this case is called Quick Map Services. So I type in Quick Map and it pops up. And if I click on this, what will happen is there will actually be a button here that says install the plugin. I've already installed this, so I don't need to click on that button. But when you open this up for the first time, you'll need to click on install plugin, and that will install the plugin. So for now, I'm just going to click close. And then once I have the plugin installed, I can come up to Web, Quick Map Services, go over to Open OSM for OpenStreetMaps, and I'm going to add the OpenStreetMaps standard map and click on that. I'm going to go ahead and maximize this again. Now, what the program is doing is it's actually downloading a base map from the internet. And so now we can actually see the outline of Madagascar, some of the islands off the shore, the east coast of Africa, as well as the ocean. So this just gives us a better kind of view of where we are on the landscape. All right, Seheno, did you want to translate?
Yes, just one sentence for translation, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. Resaka plugin zany no nazavainy mafio teo, tsy de tena izy hoe fanazavana be ahoana le izy ataoko fa efa somary azontsika somary bazika ihany le izy teo. Misy fanontaniana Ivan io momba ny plugin fa rehefa aorianan'izay tsika mamaly azy. De ny plugin aloha mazava ho azy fa amin'ny internet any aloha nazahoantsika anazy tsy haiko raha misy fomba hafa afaka anaovana an'izay fa amin'ny internet le izy misy service amin'ny internet ahafahana mahazo azy de ohatra hoe le street map na le karazana plugin hafa reny. Zay ihany angamba no tsara ho fantatra momba ny plugin. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Seheno. All right, I'm going to show now another plugin that I think can be really useful for biologists. And it's called the Gbif Plug-In, or it stands for the Global Biodiversity Information Facility is what it stands for. And it's essentially a repository that has the locations of where species have been recorded from museum records. And this plugin, I'm going to come back up here again to manage and install plugins, is simply called Gbif Occurrences. If I click on that, I will need to install the plugin again. I don't need to do that in this case because I've already installed it for my computer. I'm going to click close. When you do that, you'll get a button up here on your screen that says Load Gbif Occurrences. You can click on that. Now a forum comes up that asks you for some information about what type of data you would like. The type of data that I'm interested in is I want to see all of the silky sifaka records from Madagascar. So I'm going to type in the scientific name of the species, click load occurrences. And now essentially what it's going to do is it's going to download from the internet all of the silky sifaka occurrences that it has from the various museums. And so what you can see now is all of these points have now appeared on the map. And I'm actually going to, it's a little bit hard to see right now. So I'm going to turn off some of these layers. And I can turn them off by clicking on the box over here where the check mark is. And so you can see that there are a number of points up here in Northeast Madagascar, as well as one point down here by the capital. So that is probably a mistake. It is not unusual for points to be incorrect in this data set. And so you would definitely have to do some additional cleanup. And I'm going to show you how to do that cleanup here. So if I want to remove this point near the capital, because I know that there are no wild silky sifakas here at this location, I'm going to come over here to the layer that was just added, right click on it, and I have to start what's called an editing session, where I can begin to edit that layer. So I'll come up to toggle editing, click on toggle editing, and now I'm able to edit the layer. Now, what I want to do is I want to select this point here and remove it because I know that it is not correct. So I'm going to come over here. I have a button that's called Select Features by Area or by a single click. I'm going to click on that, and I can actually then drag a box around this point. And I'm going to release. And what you can see is now it has selected that point. In order to delete it, all I have to do now is click the delete key on my keyboard. And that point is gone. Almost. There's one last thing I have to do. I have to go back to my layer, right click on it, and I actually have to turn off the editing session that I turned on by clicking on toggle editing again. And when I click on toggle editing, it says, do you want to save the changes that I made? If I click discard, that point will actually reappear on my map because I'm saying I don't want to make that change. But I actually do want to make that change. So I'm going to click save, and now that point has been deleted. One other thing that I want to show you about this particular plugins is, can you see this little symbol over here? When I hover over it, it says this is a temporary scratch layer only. The contents will be discarded after closing the project. So if I download data using this button, this Gbif plugin or button, or if I manipulate my data in some way in the program, sometimes it produces a temporary layer. Temporary because if I close my project here, if I close this program, this will be deleted and I will have to recreate it or re-download it again. But I don't want to do that. I want to make it permanent so the next time when I open my project, I can continue to work with the data. So I can do that by right-clicking on this, going to Make Permanent, click on Make Permanent, and it's going to pull up a box and it's going to say, first of all, what type of format do you want to save this in? And I actually want to save this in an Esri shapefile, which is what the rest of my files are in. And we talked about shapefiles early on. And then I need to choose the location and a file name. And I can do that by clicking on these three dots here, which is essentially the browse. And it's going to pull up a window where then I can navigate to where I'd like to save it. Lemur Occurrences seems like a good place. And I'm going to type in a file name that makes sense to me. Click Save. and then click OK. And so now a little note came up here that says it was successfully saved, meaning that this is no longer a scratch layer. It's been saved on my computer's hard drive, and it's available for the future to use in this project or in additional projects. Okay, Seheno, I'm going to stop here again and let you summarize before I move to the next topic.
Yes, thank you so much. Ya, anazava kely ndray tsika efa miditra lalindalina, ataoko mbola concentré tsara daholo sa efa misy lasy. Inona dia izany indray no ametraka fanontaniana dia avy eo mamaly ao amin'ny chat. Inona le anaran'le plugin nahafahan'ny Mathieu napiditra n'ity Lemur Conservation Network ity. Misy karazana plugin le izy izay hita amin'ny internet ozy izy, inona ny anaran'izay teo, afaka mametraka ao anatin'ny chat ve isika. Dia io plugin io rehefa nampidirina dia tsy nampidirina intsony moa satria efa nazy efa misy ao anatin'le izy dia nahafahana napiditra données io lasa point io inona anaran'izy teo, Gbif, très bien. Zay mintsiny io le izy nahafahana nanokatra an'ireo données ireo. Mety ho very ozy izy rehefa mivadika eto izany dia mety ho very le données nampidirina lasa koa teto fa tandremo tsara ozy izy dia mila sauvena. Inona ny anaran'le format izay tokony sauvena anazy mba tsy havery an'io couche io mba ho lasa permanent le couche. Inona ny anaran'le format tokony hanampidirana anazy tao. Très bien, shapefile. Ya, zay ny amin'ny ankapobeny dia efa miditra lalindala ihany tsika manohy tsika. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Seheno. All right, the next thing that I want to show you how to do. So we've done, well, let me back up. We've done a few things. We've imported a polygon layer. I'm going to turn that back on. We've imported a line layer, which are the roads of Madagascar. And I've added points by downloading occurrence data that's available from Gbif. The next thing that I want to show you how to do is to add points to your map that you may have entered into a spreadsheet. So what I'm going to show you here is essentially, this is a spreadsheet where someone might enter in data and that then they may want to see within a GIS program. So these are actually red-ruffed lemur locations. So you can see here's the genus, there's the specific epithet, and there's a variety of other information in here, such as the year and month and day of the record. And there's all kinds of information in here about associated with each of these records. The key being, right, that we have a longitude and a latitude. So if I were to automatically enter in this information, like I could, I'm just going to copy and paste this down here. But maybe I'll add in some information for this species from my GPS or from some data that I was given by a colleague. So then what I can do, if I save this file, I want to save it as a CSV delimited file. That's really key when you're adding data to GIS. Save it as a CSV delimited file. And when we save it as that, we can actually then open it into our GIS program. So in order to do that, I'm going to come over here to Open Data Source Manager, click on that button. And it comes up and it says, okay, what file would you like to load? We can click on this Browse button again, the 3 periods. And this is the file that I just showed you. It's red-ruffed lemur Gbif occurrences. So this is actually a CSV delimited file that I obtained from Gbif. And if I click on that, it pulls up some information here. Now, there's a couple things you'll need to watch for when you're importing your data. Number one, what is the file format? This has correctly predicted that this is a CSV separated values. So you'll want to make sure that is the case. Number two, some other things to watch for are the geometry definition. So your data is basically is made up of point coordinates. That's correct. It's saying, what is your X field? Typically, the X field in GIS is always your longitude, okay? Your Y field is usually your latitude. And so you need to, and so this program has correctly kind of predicted that the decimal longitude column probably goes to the X field, and the decimal latitude column goes to the Y field. It may not always correctly predict that. If it doesn't, what you can do is you can click on this down arrow and you can select the column from your CSV file that should go to the X field. One last thing is you need to know what projection your data is in, because the program doesn't know, it just has these coordinates. Now, again, the program has correctly predicted that this data is in WGS 84, which I know it is. Typically, latitude and longitude coordinates are in WGS 84. If you had something else that was not latitude and longitude, then you would need to know what projection that was in. Typically, it's like in meters. And then we need to know what type of projection. So you can actually go here and select the different types of some of the different projections. But this has actually correctly predicted it's in WGS 84 because it's in latitude and longitude. Okay, so we're in good shape here. Now we can click Add and close. And what you can see, we're actually going to zoom in a little bit here so it's a little bit easier to see. I can zoom in on the map by using this plus magnifying glass button. If I click on that, I can click and drag a box around this area. And now what we can see is that we actually have a lot of data to look at. I'm going to go ahead and, so we have these kind of tan or yellowish colored points. These are the silky sifaka points that we loaded in earlier. And now we have these kind of blue points that are the red ruffed lemur data that we added in from this CSV file. And if I didn't like the colors of each of these points, I could also change those, or I can also change the size of these points. I can make them larger or smaller by going into properties and going to symbology, like we did with the roads and the polygons. But I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to actually take a brief pause and let Seheno give you, again, a quick summary.
Thank you, Matthew. I'm going to translate the key points, but at the same time, I'm asking questions for Chinese to make sure that you follow, guys. Okay? Yes. Eto amin'ilay fampidirana données brutes amin'izay ary tsika e. Avy any amin'ny terrain sika dia te hampiditra an'ilay données izay ananantsika natao anatin'ilay terrain ampidirintsika matetika anatina Excel izy io. Dia ampiditra an'io zany tsika anatin'ilay données izay zany nataony Mathieu teo. Ahoana ny fampidirana, ny importer données brutes hiditra ao anatin'ilay QGIS. Zay le hevitra teo. Rehefa mampiditra an'ilay izy ao amin'ilay data source manager teo ilay izy, inona avy ireo zavatra anankitelo lehibe izay tsy maintsy jerena hozy izy. Ny iray no ameko dia ny roa tonga dia misy manoratra aingana ao amin'ny chat. Hozy izy hoe jereo tsara ilay format. Le format zany, inona ilay format atao, jereo tsara ilay izy hoe inona ilay format ho ampidirinao. Misy karazana extension tsy Excel, tsy point XLS le izy teo fa point inona. Yes, zay mihitsiny. Très bien. Inona ilay zavatra faharoa mila jerena hozy izy teo. File format dia inona ilay faharoa izay tena important be. Très bien. Eo misy an'ilay X dia ilay Y. Inona hozy izy ilay X? Tokony ho inona? Tokony misy longitude dia misy latitude. Zay, longitude ny X, Y, latitude. Zay indrindra. Ary io zany raha vao mifamadika io dia tsy mipoitra mihitsy ilay données, very be adiny iray. Ye. Manarak'izay, zavatra fahatelo farany tsy maintsy jerena, file format, geometry definition. Fahatelo, inona le fahatelo teo? Très bien, projection. Projection. Matetika hozy izy mafio ny projection atsika dia WGS 84. Dia verifio tsara foana ihany fa io lay mivadika très bien iasina. Io zany mivadika foana indray dia veritsika Andriamanitra naninona izy ity lay projection no diso. Dia matetika hozy izy les projections les WGS 84 longitude sy latitude foana. Reo zavatra anankitelo reo zany no ampidirina rehefa misy zany tsy nakaiza ary le données dia miverina mijery an'ireo point anankitelo tena ngeza be ireo. Jerevany koa le manipulation nataony mafio teo, mizoom, midézoomer zany zavatra zany logika zany dia tena be da be somary intuitif ihany le QGIS, misy icône be da be reo dia hitanareo tsara le amin'le souris midézoom, mizoomer. Ya, saotra betsaka antsika rehetra nandray anjara. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Seheno. I'm going to show, I know we're getting really short on time. We only have 15 minutes left. So the last thing I want to show is how to add raster data, since we haven't looked at that yet. It's very similar to what we did for the vector data. So I actually have a folder in my browser panel that lists where I have a raster data. And this is actually shows the forest cover in Madagascar in 2014. So very similar as before, I can click on it, drag it, and drop it, and it will be added to my map. And essentially now what I've put on here, it's a bit really hard to look at the way that it decided to draw it, is essentially a grid that shows every single grid cell that has was labeled as forest. So I'm going to make this a little bit easier to work with. The first thing I want to do is I actually want to, it's drawing on top of everything. See how it's at the top? I don't want it to draw on top of everything. I actually want to click, drag, and drop it down. So now the points are drawing on top. The next thing I want to do is I want to change the color because yellow is a terrible color for this particular data set. I don't know why QGIS wanted to create yellow, but we're going to change that. So I'm actually going to right click on it, go down to properties, select the symbology. And so you can see that everything that has forest cover is labeled as a 1 and it's saying that it's yellow. If I actually double click on that, I can change the color. I'm actually going to change it to this nicer green color, which I think makes more sense for forest cover. Click OK, and then click Apply. Much easier to look at. So now what we have is we actually have, I'm going to move this window out of the way a little bit. We can see the protected areas. We can see the forest cover on top, and then the points of where the different lemurs have been recorded. And we can also see these roads as well that we added earlier to our map. An additional thing that I want to show you about rasters is we can come up to information to view, again, some information about this layer. It shows us the path. And check this out. Look at the projection, or what's also known as the CRS. This is in a different projection than our other data. Our other data was in WGS84. This is actually in a UTM projection. And so if we do any kind of analysis with this data, we probably would want to reproject this layer to maybe WGS84. It tells us the units. It's in meters, it's not in degrees anymore, and that's because of this projection. And if we go all the way down here to the pixel size, this can be really helpful. It says it's 30 by 30. So what that's telling me is that each of those individual grid cells is 30 by 30 meters. So we have information about where forest cover is on the landscape on a 30 by 30 meter grid, which can be really helpful. Okay, and I think maybe I will show, actually, let me stop. Seheno, I'll let you do the translation. And then I don't know, maybe we need to stop for today, or I don't know if we'll have time for any other topics, but let's go ahead and do the translation.
Yes, thank you. I will let Misa to explain the raster data. Thank you.
Okay. Nazava izy momba ny fangalana ny données raster indray teto mitovitovy amin'ny fangalana ny données vecteur ihany sotomina avy amin'le browser ilay izy dia apetaka ao anatin'le placen'le couche. Ny zavatra tena important ngambany ao anatin'le données raster afaka ovaina ny lokony raha tsy tianareo ny lokon'le izy io zao izy novainy maitsomaitso atao amin'le propriété ihany, propriété de la couche. Dia afaka mahita information koa nareo mombamomba an'le données raster, hitanareo ao ny projection zay tsy mitovy amin'ny projection le données vecteur atsika hafa mihitsy raha ohatra no analyse manaraka zany mety possible hoe avadikitsika mitovy ny projection ny système de coordonnées de référence les données raster. Hitantsika koa ny angezan'ny pixel anankiray 30 x 30 izy teo ny pixel le aussi za teo hoe rectangle le izy hoe fikambanana pixel be da be le données raster, ny pixel anankiray zany 30 x 30 mètres mety ilainy zay rehefa manao analyse nareo any afarany. Zay ngamba ny tena hoe ligne ngezangeza. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. One last thing that I want to show everybody. I don't think I'll be going over a new topic. I think it's best to wrap things up right now. But one last thing I need to show you is how to save a project. So that way next time you can open up this map and you don't have to make all of these changes again. So in order to save a project, it's really easy. All you have to do is come up to this button over here that says Save Project. Click on that. Then you can navigate to where you'd like to save the project. These projects are saved as QGC projects. And so I'm just going to type an example GIS project as the name. And then all I have to do is click save. And now I've saved this project. So next time that I want to load this, all I have to do is navigate to where I saved that project. You can see here it is, example GIS project. I can double click on that and it will open. Or I can open the QGIS program and click on this Open Project button, and then I can navigate to where that project is saved. So now I've had this saved, and now I can come back to it and do additional changes in the future. I just want to say, to wrap things up, thank you again for joining us. I really appreciate everyone's interest. I hope this has been helpful. Please provide feedback to us about what was helpful, what was not helpful, how we could improve, and other topics that you would like to see related to this. Next week, just as a reminder, there will be a Q&A session at the same time on Wednesday. And then we also have put together, and I'll let Lucia kind of jump in here, we've put together a Google Drive account where all of the data that I've used today, you can get access to and add it and practice with on your own computer in QGIS, as well as a starter sheet. The starter sheet provides links to additional training, as well as links to the data that I downloaded for this. So you can either get the data that I used here by downloading it off the Google Drive or going directly to the sites where I downloaded it. As well as the presentation I gave is available there, and a very brief outline of our discussion. I'll let Lucy, I don't know if you wanted to direct them or provide any additional information, but that's what I have. And thank you all, appreciate it.
First of all, thank you so much, Matthew and Sen and Misa, for the translations. This was great. So I just put it in the chat, the link to the drive you all have access to view, but we're going to send it to you as well, just in case, because there were other people that couldn't attend today that wanted to have access to the presentation and to the different resources that we're providing. So the idea for this is that you guys go and try out what you learned today, try to practice, read well, take your time reading well the materials that we sent, and come back with the questions, and we'll dedicate a session to that. So that's basically what we're trying to do. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you all. I look forward to talking with you all again in a bit more interactive next week. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going just to summarize and translate what you both saying earlier. Yeah, misaotra betsaka antsika rehetra tamin'ny fanatrehana inonay fa tena nafinaritra nafahana nianatra zavatra momba ny QGIS androany ho an'ireo izay mety hoe tara dia fanazavana kely fotsiny résumé kely fotsiny nataontsika androany dia ny fampahafantarana inona ny QGIS en général, ohatrany ahoana ilay interface, inona ilay karazana données miditra ao, misy vecteur, misy polygone, misy an'ilay vecteur sy raster data. Inona no atao rehefa ate ampiditra an'ilay données brutes ao anatin'ilay QGIS, inona daholo ny zavatra tsy maintsy jerena tsara. Dia io ny lien namen'i Lucia, Google Drive izy io zay ahafahanareo manao practice, zany hoe manao exercice any an-trano. Rehefa nilazaina fa hoe aza installena aloha le QGIS aloha ao aorianany izao session amin'izay installeo amin'izay le QGIS fa gratuit le izy gratuit daholo na plugin raha izy mafio gratuit. Installeo amin'izay ary le izy manaova exercice dia miverena amin'ny herinandro anao ametraka fanontaniana sy amaly an'izany isika. Misy lien alefako anaovana inscription mba ahafahantsika mandrindra anazy tsara dia aza misalasala mametraka ny fanontaniana ihany koa manangona moa zany angony tsara ny fanontaniana dia amin'ny herindray tsika mihaona dia misaotra betsaka antsika rehetra. Thank you all. Mikasika ny fanontaniana izay napetrakantsika dia marihana fa angonina daholo ireo dia ho alefa. Natao record koa ity vidéo ity dia afaka ino moa zany afaka alefa ilay vidéo. Aza misalasala manome feedback hozy izy Lucia sy Moskwik tena important be satria pilote ity mbola mifanandramana daholo dia ninina commentaire sy izay feedback mety ananantsika dia aza misalasala manao izany. Dia misaotra betsaka antsika rehetra amin'ny fotoana rehetra dia thank you so much Matthew for this first session on QGIS. We really appreciate it and we are really grateful for your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it. So.
Yeah, thank you. Afaka mandao an'ny Zoom amin'izay tsika dia veloma daholo manaraka indray dia afaka omeko ny lien Zoom lien aza matahotra fa ameko daholo. Fankafantatra daholo tsika dia ameko.
Misotra velum.
Veloma
Bye
daholo.
everyone. See you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Velume.